Thanks to my parents, I have always been confident in speaking English. I went to an international school when I was in kindergarten, and this experience helped me have good English speaking skills. But I was surprised when I got into junior high school, because every English class focused on grammar and reading, which is no fun. I started losing interest in learning English and I could not improve my English during that time. I wish there were more opportunities to speak English and enjoy learning it at school. Some people think it is unnecessary to learn English if you're living in Japan, but I believe it is very important to learn English if even for people who never leave Japan. The Japanese economy hasn't grown for decades. It's becoming harder for Japanese companies to fully count on the Japanese economy. Also, technology has been developed. Japanese companies can become partners with foreign companies easily. So, it is becoming almost necessary to use English in the workforce. Therefore, learning English can help students in their future. Most Japanese people avoid speaking English. I believe the main reason is because of the fear of making a mistake in grammar or pronunciation. Now schools teach us what is right and wrong, and this kind of education prevents students from speaking freely. Even though schools teach us grammar and vocabulary, they never teach us how to use them in real-life situations, so it is not helpful at all. Also, many students consider English as a subject they must learn, which makes them not want to learn English. So, how can education change this situation? I have 4 suggestions to improve English education in Japan. First, the government should require English education starting from first grade at elementary school. As students get older, it is going to be harder for them to recognize English as a language. Instead, they'll try to learn as subject they must learn, and it is not going to be fun at all. By learning English from first grade, students will recognize English as one of the ways to communicate with people not from Japan, and it is going to be more exciting for them to learn. Second, there should be a speaking section for university entrance exams. If the speaking sections were required for exams, there would be a lot of speaking classes at school, which will increase the amount of time for students to speak English and also help them not hesitate to speak English. Also, even if some of the students will still consider English as a subject they must learn, they will still try to practice because it's required for exam, which is like a whole point for high school students to study. Third, schools should play English movies and songs during English class. Most students hate reading or listening to English because there is no story that makes them excited, but they love watching movies or listening to songs since there are no borders. It is connected between human emotions, which all human beings have in common. Even if these are in English, students will still have fun through the pictures and rhythm they have, and this excitement can encourage students to learn and get used to English. Fourth, the government should offer more foreign exchange programs with scholarship, which each of them based on income, English abilities, and grades. By offering a broader range of exchange programs without causing households to have financial difficulties, students will be encouraged to go outside of Japan and learn not only English, but also how to be independent, understand other cultures, and develop skills that are becoming necessary in their future. These 4 suggestions to improve English education in Japan will improve Japanese students' English skills. Thank you.
I believe English education in Japan should change for the following 2 reasons. One is blah, blah, blah. That is how many of us would start an essay. Clearly, politely, and safely. But how many of those essays sound exactly the same? Probably too many. When I participated in a global competition for debate held abroad, I noticed something striking. Students from around the world weren't afraid to express themselves. They had confidence, power, emotion, and a message in their voice. They didn't have hesitation in expressing themselves and were focused on being heard. Now, imagine asking Japanese students to write on how English education in Japan should change. How many of them would begin their essay with the exact same sentence I just used? That number would be staggering. We are afraid to step out of the mold, or maybe we don't even realize that we're in one. Because in Japan, education doesn't encourage stepping out. It rather teaches us to stay inside the mold we are given. So now, let me change my introduction. Did you learn Japanese by repeating after your teacher word for word? Did you learn Japanese by being forced to memorize words you had never even heard of in real life? If we want to truly create a society where students have the power to bring change in the future, we must be taught how communication really works. Not a game of mimicking each other, but a game of catch between people. What most of us imagine of as English education in Japan is repeating after your teacher word for word, or memorizing a thick word book for a test. I do acknowledge these learnings may increase your English knowledge, but they do very little to help you actually communicate in daily life. This is clear when we see that even many university graduates, after years of study, cannot hold a simple conversation with a native English speaker when they meet one in town. What we need is not more repetition, we need experience. We need to express ourselves, to speak, and to have the will to use English the way we use Japanese. That is, with purpose and emotion. What we lack today is active learning in the classroom. For example, I have one English lesson per week with a native teacher at school. However, since there are over 30 students for that one teacher, almost everyone chit-chats in Japanese, even in that precious time. What I feel is that lessons should create an environment where students are encouraged and expected to use English to connect with each other. That's how real communication grows. And yet, if you ask most Japanese students to write on how English education in Japan should change, they probably start with, I believe education in Japan should change for the following 2 reasons. Why? Because that's the format we've been taught to follow. That format feels safe and we don't want to make mistakes. But language isn't supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be alive, and no one learns to speak from inside a mold. So let's stop teaching students how to write the perfect essays. When you are thrown into an environment where nobody speaks Japanese, when you're using English as a communication tool, no one cares if your grammar isn't perfect or if your vocabulary doesn't sound academic. What matters the most is how passionate you are, how much you care about what you're saying, and how much emotion you have behind your words. However, here's the thing. In Japan, we're taught that mistakes are the big bad wolf. But in real conversations, mistakes are what we should learn from. If we just keep on repeating the same set of phrases because we are scared of messing up, we will never learn how to express our true feelings to others. In order for students to clearly express themselves, we need classrooms where it is okay to make mistakes, to mess up, and a one that pushes you to keep going. We need education that puts real and meaningful communication first, even if it may seem like a total disaster at the start. Let's build a society where education isn't just about giving the right answers, but about saying what is actually in your heart. That's the kind of education I would like to see.
Here is a common occurrence for Japanese people. You step foot in a foreign country and engage in your first ever English conversation, digging and retrieving every vocabulary and grammar textbook, recalling the long hours studying for the IELTS or English test at school. But every time you open your mouth, the words come out jumbled, lacking any form of structure or coherence. Every point you wanted to get across is lost amidst the panic and overwhelming anxiety of fear. The National University of Singapore study states that in EFL classes, approximately 75% of Japanese students experience some degree of anxiety, with 11% reporting that their progress was strongly set back by it. So I want to argue, consequently, that the greatest obstacle for Japanese students learning English is the simple emotion of fear, which is justified by Japan's homogeneous society, which places a high value on academic excellence and social cohesion. Inevitably, many students have heightened sensitivity towards standing out or making mistakes that might attract unwanted attention. So, to address this massive roadblock of fear in English education, I believe that only when the desire to be understood exceeds the fear of making mistakes or being judged, will English transform into a medium of communication rather than a test of accuracy? So as an example, I am a bilingual student. I moved abroad when I was 4. I lived in both the UK and the US for a total of 5 years. But contrary to common beliefs, a full-out English environment was not enough to sufficiently improve my writing or speaking skills, especially for academic tasks such as presentations and essays. I was insecure about my Japanese accent and wonky sentences, so when I had to actually do these presentations or timed essays, my lack of confidence worsened, and my grammar and vocabulary level further deteriorated. However, this all changed when I moved back to Japan, and I was forced to conduct a debate at my international school. As always, I panicked, my voice shaky, my hands fidgeting restlessly. However, what surprised me the most by the end of the debate was that my anxiety had disappeared, and it was replaced by this drive to win the audience over, to convince and persuade them that my argument was right and that I was justified. 2 essential factors led me to this development. First, a task that compelled me to get a specific message across to an audience. And second, a high-pressure but mentally engaging environment. So, for the future of English education in Japan, I propose to systematically integrate a setting that demands persuasion and resolve to convey your opinion to another person under pressure. And this environment can be structurally administered from as early as preschool, where children can communicate and can use role play with English to communicate in pretend stories or careers, to ground the belief that being understood is rewarded more than perfect grammar. And for junior and senior high school students, the stakes would increase. With 3-to-1 debates, mock UN conferences, and trials will be incorporated. And by letting their classmates decide the winner, it establishes a competitive environment that enables mutual understanding that extends beyond just advanced vocabulary or grammar. And at a university level, AI-powered English training models can role-play as colleagues, clients, or executives, and they can be incorporated into the curriculum. And AI recognition and NLP can analyze fluency, clarity, and persuasiveness over all other aspects, allowing students to see measurable growth under resilience and pressure. And as Japan is an aging society, senior citizens also comprise a large portion of our labor force. So it is critical for these groups to initiate global communication for the future development of Japanese society. And since older citizens often have limited tech experience, English-speaking immigrants and AI-powered mentorship can provide an intergenerational exchange amongst different cultures while simultaneously fostering functional English skills. Fear fades when connection matters the most. Being understood is the heart of English communication and ultimately the true purpose of language. Thank you.